Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you, Madam President. I appreciate that answer. And I think precisely because we're not clairvoyant, which is why we should be careful about some of the policies that we make. When we create a law such as this, we're creating a mandate on the citizens of this state, effectively potentially prohibiting them from purchasing something because it doesn't meet the requirements that the seller would have to meet. And that doesn't exist in our current law. The thing is, we don't know what's going to happen. You know, things like this have happened in the past. You know, we had a big dust up a few years ago about light bulbs. You know, they were going to get rid of incandescent light bulbs, and then we were going to have those, curly Q fluorescent ones. But that didn't work out so well, you know, and then we've all kind of switched to LEDs. But there's still a need in certain situations for incandescent bulbs. So the government had to reverse itself on that subject. And I'm just wondering why we're going through the trouble of banning something. You know, I mean, I just don't see the benefit to the citizens of the state to ban anything unless it's harmful. And these aren't harmful, they're just maybe not as technologically advanced as the newest generation of smoke detectors. But why ban them? Is there a compelling state interest to putting a ban in place through you?
Thank you, Senator Gaston.
One, it's mission critical to ensure the safety and well-being of people in our state, and to make sure that we're in compliance with the national standards and recommendations with respect to, security of people being able to have the latest technology that's going to put them and their families in the most safest position. And so, with that being said, we have a lot of testimony within the Public Safety Committee and the realm where this came out favorably with bipartisan support to make sure that people are meeting those safety standards. And like I said, we're not going to baby out the bathwater, that people do have an opportunity to come into compliance within a specific period of time that will allow them to be able to control this technology. Now, you raised a question in terms of affordability of this, and it's not that far off from what the new physical impact will be. People can purchase these things between $15 and $35. Having done a physical analysis of it, folks are spending somewhere between $15 and $35 currently for the old technology, so it's not going to be cost prohibitive. I think this is the best way to go, and quite candidly, I think at this point of increased, safety, we should always be looking for opportunities to ensure that our people are as safe as possible and in concurrent with the national standards here in the state of Connecticut.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I appreciate the commentary by my colleague. I'm trying to get to maybe just a little bit more specific information about the what-ifs in this particular situation. I understand the desire to try and move people towards the latest technology and these improved smoke detectors. I totally get that. My question was more about why aren't we simply allowing the marketplace to do that? We've already determined that the cost of these 10-year battery detectors is reasonable. I mean, they might cost even twice as much as a traditional smoke detector with a battery, but they're still only 20 or 30 bucks. And I think that's well within the affordability realm for most people. The question I have is that, right now people can make a choice. Your constituents, my constituents, they can go down to the hardware store, they decide what they want to purchase. And if they believe that there's value added in having a 10-year battery, then they certainly can. Is there any requirement, as far as you know, through you, Madam President, that these batteries actually do last the 10 years through you?
Senator Gaston.
And it would be completely speculative on my behalf because I don't have a 10-year battery currently. But for the experts who testified and experts who come forward to talk about this, have certainly testified to that fact. I think that's one of the reasons that we have people with certain areas of expertise to be able to share that expertise as opposed to lay people like you and I sometimes absorb that a little bit more because these people have spent sufficient time in the industry.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Again, I appreciate that too, and I certainly have great respect for people that have the experience in this technology to make strong recommendations. But I would suggest that you and I are much more expert in the realm of how to make legislation, not whether or not a certain smoke alarm is good. I'm more than happy to leave that to those experts. But when it comes to whether or not we should be passing laws that ban the availability of a product, I think we don't take that lightly. I think what we're doing is not only preventing someone from producing a non-harmful product that might have a use for no compelling state reason, and I also believe that we're prohibiting the purchase of that product by our constituents without a good reason. And I'm not in favor of denying the freedom of my constituents for any reason, even in cases where they make poor decisions. If it's up to them to make a poor decision, then I think that should stay in their lane as long as we're not harming other parties. Some concerns, with this legislation that I just can't get past because we have entangled the carbon monoxide and smoke detector legislation in recent years. As an example, can you tell me, through you, Madam President, how this legislation that is before us would interact with the requirement that any property sold in the state of Connecticut must have working carbon monoxide and smoke detectors at the time of sale? Through you.
Senator Gaston.
Legislation that deals specifically smoke detectors and not necessarily carbon monoxide. And so I wish I was able to give you an intelligent answer in terms of how those things will coexist. Currently, I don't have that for you.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. One of the reasons why I bring it up is because when those bills were passed, I objected to them as well, because there are so many situations that were captured by that legislation that were not anticipated. Well, at least not anticipated by the proponents until maybe I brought it up on this floor, but then those were overlooked, and I think that's a shame. For example, you have folks that may be purchasing a distressed property, for example, and we're going to force someone who's got a distressed property, that maybe a property, they're going to knock it down, the very next day after they close on the property, and yet we passed a law that says that that transaction can't occur unless the seller puts these working smoke and carbon monoxide detectors in the structure. To me, that's ridiculous, but it happened. And we also require that of bank-owned property, foreclosures, lots of situations that don't lend themselves to that being a reasonable policy. And now I'm just wondering, because what concerns me more than anything about this is if there happens to be a situation where a 10-year battery smoke detector is not available, what is the only other alternative to be in compliance if you're a consumer? Through you.
Thank you, Senator Gaston.
The bill actually does not address that, but I would use conjecture to surmise that if the person actually had a smoke detector system that is in fact operable, then I think that the fines that would ordinarily be levied for a person that's out of compliance would be held back, and that people would use due care and caution in terms of not punishing that person for not having a system that is not made available in the marketplace.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Thank you very much for that response. I think it's an interesting response because, first and foremost, there is definitely an alternative that's right in paragraph 2 of the bill, and that is that hardwired smoke detectors would be perfectly acceptable to satisfy the requirement of the law. And the other thing is, I think you're suggesting that somehow a court would not penalize someone. I think that's going maybe a little far for us to suggest that we're going to write a statute, but we don't expect it to be followed by a court down the road. But for me, if that ends up being the situation where I've got to, because of a requirement in a real estate sale, for example, have working smoke detectors in the house, and the only thing that's available to me are non-10-year battery smoke detectors, and I need to be compliant, now you're asking for someone to actually pay the expense of hardwiring the smoke detector in the house. And for me, that is problematic. It's certainly expensive, and it might be unbelievably expensive depending on the age of the home and that kind of thing. I'm bringing up these issues. I don't necessarily think this is a terrible bill. I know what we want to do here. We want to move our constituents and certainly the people that manufacture and retail these smoke detectors. We want to get them moving towards the latest technology. I'm with you, but there is a difference between encouraging that and allowing the market forces, which I think are already working very well. These things are not that expensive. They are only slightly more than a traditional battery-powered smoke detector. Let that happen. But when we come in to this circle and we pass a law to ban the availability of something, not only are we depriving the freedom of people to engage in commerce for no legitimate reason, in my view, more importantly, what we're doing is all the other laws that have been passed that affect smoke detectors are now impacted by this. And that's just one example. But we can imagine this happening very easily. You've got somebody looking to, sell a property. They become aware of the requirement that they have to have a working smoke detector. For whatever reason, these types of smoke detectors are not available. They're going to be forced to find the only other alternative, and that could be a very, very costly alternative. For me, that's a concern. Can I just ask, is there any further extension of liability to a homeowner for failing to have these type of smoke detectors, for example, through you?
Senator Gaston.
Thank you, Madam President. Not that I see currently in the bill. However, what I do understand is that this is not to include folks who have private home ownership. They would not be penalized. This is particularly for people with sort of large buildings.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much for that answer. Mr. Chairman, is it you're suggesting to me that this bill does not apply to residential homes through you?
Senator Gaston.
Thank you. What I'm saying is that in terms of the penalty, I believe this is specifically for sort of larger buildings, and that the same penalty would not apply to individuals in private homes.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Flexibility.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I appreciate the good gentleman's answers, and I will just suggest that while I do appreciate the desire to promote this new technology to get folks using the latest and greatest smoke detecting technology, which may in fact save people's lives, I think that's perfectly fine. But I think a public service announcement makes sense. I think letting the marketplace shape itself, I think allowing these things to be available, as the market creates them, makes a lot of sense. But I think creating this mandate on manufacturers, I don't think is necessary. Maybe there is a market for very, very inexpensive smoke detectors, and maybe we haven't even contemplated what that market is, but we're going to outlaw that from being sold or marketed in our state. And by virtue of that, we're also denying the freedom of our own constituents, the people that we represent. We're taking a freedom away from them to be able to purchase a product, a lawful product in our state. And I just think that's a step too far. For me, it's an example of just when I believe that our state legislature goes wrong, which is we cease to be true representatives of our constituents defending their rights and freedoms, and we enter into the realm of we know better than you. And I would never take that position. I don't believe I know better than the people I represent. I will preserve their freedom, and I'll be a no today. Thank you.
Thank you.